It's experiencing that you can do something just out of an idea that is not safe, that is most likely gonna fail. Now I realize that the presence of one human being who has the wisdom that you don't have, who cares enough and is willing to walk with you and show you the way, and who could, so from your perspective, he or she can see around corners. I really do think that our purposes evolve with us, and there are seasons in life, and they seasons start and seasons end, and you need to be able to pivot, responding to you, and be aligned and sensitive to the whispers of the soul, I call those.
Christian Ray Flores is a man of many talents and passions. His journey has spanned multiple continents, several cultures, and lots of different industries. He speaks many languages, multiple languages. He rose to fame as a pop star in Russia in the 1990s, selling millions of records. Yet he chose a different path, leaving the limelight to pursue a purpose driven life centered on faith, entrepreneurship, and social impact. Today, he channels his creativity into many ventures. That includes high performance coaching and a passion for making the world a better place. He is very much a devoted family man and a visionary leader. Christian's life is a testament to the power of transformation and living with intention. Come on along, let's meet Christian and learn from his wisdom. Christian, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you with me. I know this is our third attempt to make this happen, and we're here today. So
Yes, we
thank
are.
you.
Success.
Yes, success. Christian, I always love for our audience to really get to know who this incredible human being that is speaking to them, that is teaching them, that is really in their space. So would you do
Yeah.
me the honor of letting us know your background, like your childhood and all those, because that is what makes you the incredible human being that you are in front of me today.
Yeah, those are some shaping experiences, as I call them. But yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, it's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, to your audience. I have a very, very confusing childhood, so I'm going to give you like a hyper fast forward version of it, and then you can stop me at any time and ask me more questions if you'd like. I can clarify. Um, so basically, the fast forward version of it is that I had a very strange childhood. I am half Russian, half Chilean. I was born in Moscow. We moved to Chile when I was a baby. And that was it. We were gonna have a normal family life for the rest of our lives in Chile, which is where my dad is from. And then there was this massive fascist military coup in the 70s, and it upended our whole lives. My dad was in a concentration camp. We were refugees. It sent us traveling. I ended up basically shifting four different countries by age 7. So we went from Chile to Germany to Russia to Africa. And I land in Africa at 7 years old. This is my fourth country, and my fourth, everything is different: languages, cultures, contexts. So there's a lot of hardship there, a lot of change there very early on. And I basically grew up in Africa from 7 to 14. That was my formative years. And another thing happened that was sort of a big thing for us because my parents divorced, and we ended up back in Russia with my mother and my sister. And sort of my adulthood kicked in there. So I went to college there, started my first successful career there, and sort of moved on. We moved to the US when I was, like 20 years ago, basically. So that is the very short version of it.
Definitely is the short version because I've had the pleasure of actually listening and reading a lot of your information. But for our viewers, so that they can get
Yeah.
what's it like transitioning from various countries, various cultures, and all the different things that go with being uprooted
Yeah.
and being in a new place? Give us that feeling so that people understand.
There's a downside and upside, right? The downside is obviously, it's not fun to be a refugee. It's not fun to like be looking from outside a concentration camp in, seeing the soldiers, the military, a bunch of people in there, and not knowing if my dad's gonna ever come out. Things like that that are just extreme danger. It's too early for a child. It's very traumatic. And then changing from there to, going back to Russia, living in a communal apartment, this experiencing poverty, change of language, change of climate as well. Russia's pretty cold. I got very sick there, very, very
Mm.
sick. I had chronic pneumonia, and I would go into pneumonia 4 times in a row. I was in hospitals. I almost died, basically. And then shifting to Mozambique, which was very laid back, tropical, again, very different culture, and having to figure out the language, the culture, sort of the customs, the rhythms of life, all of those things. Uh, the downside is it's very disorienting, right? To to put it mildly, very disorienting, almost paralyzing to a degree.
Mm.
So my dad tells me that for the first year, when I moved to Africa, I was quiet. I just didn't say anything, especially in public, because I was so insecure about communication and language. Because they kept changing the language on me, so you know, and I coughed for a full year after
Oh,
going to Africa. But it healed me. So the tropical climate really healed me forever. I never got sick again. I'm very healthy now, but I coughed for a full year after arriving there, like that, that chest
yeah.
cold, that dry chest cold, that's horrible.
Wow.
And so the entry, sort of the landing there, four countries in a row was very, very hard. On the upside, I learned 4 languages by age 9, which was a massive gift, right? I learned how to uh, sort of read people, because if you're hyper focused
Mm.
on fitting in and the culture keeps changing, you learn quicker. It's almost like this primal survival talent kicks in of understanding body language and inflections, and hearing language and learning quickly. All of those things really came in handy for basically for the rest of my life, right? So those are huge advantages that I have now: cultural flexibility, the ability to sort of understand other people's points of view that are very divergent from yours or from your culture. So this thinking, this sort of broader thinking, when you can see how very different people think very differently and you accept all of them, right? So there's so many gifts that came from that, so many gifts. Obviously, the ability to overcome, hardship, and being used to suffering, and being not being afraid of suffering as a normal people are, Uh, after living through these things, you live in the first world. I live in the US now, and the things that people are worried about, I laugh at, and I go, seriously, let me tell you something, and it's not in I'm not trying to be condescending, but I'm trying to say, you can actually learn something from suffering. In fact, most of the things that you learn that are valuable are actually learned in suffering in one way or another. But being terrified of suffering is actually a huge disadvantage in life.
Mm.
So it's really helpful, I think, to learn that you can withstand quite a lot of suffering and be okay, and I think that's a very positive, optimistic thing to be able to know. So a lot
What
of
drew
upsides, in other words.
Yes, and what drew me to you are those experiences,
Right.
having gone through war in Lebanon myself and understanding the
Yeah.
culture change and how much you learned from those experiences and the empathy that
Yeah.
comes with those. Those are priceless to this day. That's
Yeah.
the
They stay
gift that,
forever. Yeah.
yes,
They
yes.
stay forever. So how old were you when you were in Lebanon during the war?
9 to 12.
Yeah, you're a very conscious age. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't regret any experiences I've ever had because just like you said, you learn so much
You
from the
do.
times that are tough.
Yeah.
Christian, how did you end up being a pop star in Russia?
In Russia. Well, we went back to Russia when my parents divorced, and I was musical my whole life, right? So, but at the same time, I never thought of it as a profession or as a career, because nobody in my family does that. So like ever since I was 4 years old, my mom and dad would have visitors at home and they would say, "Okay, Christian, sing a song," and I would perform for them because I had a natural voice. So that evolved eventually when we were in Africa. They had a little Latin children's choir, and we played like these folk things from Brazil and Argentina and Peru, like all Latin American stuff. And I was part of that group, and I loved it. And I just remember, I really, when I coach people now, I tell them, you have to make sure you understand your natural proclivities. And the best way to do it is to remember what were they when you were a child? What made you feel fully alive or excited? And, where you just had this hyper focus on something. And for me, that was music. It was singing, actually, specifically. So I was in this little choir, and it was like they gave me some solo parts here and there, but it was a hobby. That's what it was. And I took like piano lessons and guitar lessons and things like that. But it was all hobby level stuff. Well, fast forward to Russia, I picked up dancing. Break dancing was all the rage. And I was like, who are these people who can move like it's special effects, and again, a natural involuntary proclivity, right? I was drawn to these people, and they were like deep underground people. And this is Soviet
Mm,
Union stuff, right? There were maybe 100 of us in the whole nation, to be honest with you. Like it
yeah.
was very underground. And but I was drawn to that, and I sought them out, and I found them, and I learned, and I danced, and I became really good at it. So that, again, hobby level stuff, passion, pure passion, nothing else. I'm getting a normal education. I got a master's degree in economics. All of my friends are going into banking and, for and international trade and things like that, or finance. And, but it sort of happened. I graduated when the Soviet Union became Russia. So all of a sudden it was free, completely free for about a decade. And then it closed down again, right? So now we see it now and it's different. But at the time, it was completely free, free market. Anybody can do anything. It was like the Wild West, including music. So music was very
Mm.
regulated, very top down. There's no way you can become anything, unless you know somebody up high. And then all of a sudden, I graduate and I'm super bored with international trade. I was working this like entry level in this company. I have no idea what they were doing, to be honest with you, still to this day. It's very strange things. But I was really bored. I knew I really hate doing this, basically. And because I already had some skills, singing, dancing, this and that, I was like, yeah, maybe I can try the showbiz thing. I got a friend or two who are in show business, and I started just circulating in those circles. And I had a work ethic. I had some talent, obviously. I had some like really a high focus, high ambition sort of. I was creative. And basically, I went for it full force, quit my job, didn't do anything else, just did music. And within a year, I had like 2 or 3 contracts offered to me, record contracts. I was on national television by the end of the year, and it sort of snowballed. It went from small clubs to big, to all the way to sports arenas, and across 15 different countries. It was everything: video, magazine, radio, everything. So
What was
uh,
the upside of that whole experience of being a pop star?
there was again some downsides. I think the
We're going to
upside
get into
is
those.
I think the upside, honestly, the biggest upside for me is that you can do something high risk, something that is based on a deep sense of purpose and passion, and it can pay off. Like just experiencing, not knowing that theoretically, because you read biographies and yeah, yeah, good for you, Steve Jobs or whatever, uh, but if you experience it firsthand, there's just nothing like it, especially if this is your first attempt, not your third, not your fifth. So, I went from scribbling songs and rehearsing with dancers and rappers and, my band to, and nobody knows or cares who I am, to 10,000 people singing that song back to me, something that I wrote, and partying to it, and it's everywhere. So that experience alone was a massive boost because it's experiencing that you can do something just out of an idea that is not safe, that is most likely going to fail, and then it succeeds. And experiencing the formula of success in person, that was probably my biggest takeaway because then I basically replicated, I've changed 5 careers by now, and I've replicated this feeling in the it's almost like a playbook over and over again my whole life now. And that was the biggest gift, right? The biggest achievement there.
What was the downside of fame? Because in today's world, most
Yeah,
people define success as either wealth or
right.
fame, and they believe that that's success. So, what was the
Well,
downfall?
the downside of that was, I think, for me, it was I don't think I was mature enough to really take advantage of it. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. For example, if I was going through the same thing right now, right? I'm secure, I'm happy, I'm wiser, I'm more experienced. But if I had something like that happening to me right now, I would be much more generous, collaborate with more people, more artists.
Mm,
I would make more friends. I would really pay more attention to the business side of things than I did back then.
mm,
I would learn skills that I don't have on the business side, on the management side, on the distribution, all of those things. And I had some because I had a degree in economics. I had more actually than most artists do. So I still own all of my masters because of that, which is a huge advantage. But I think I look back and I go, oh my gosh, you were so insecure.
mm.
And when you're insecure, you front, right? You put forward arrogance and ego. So I had all these artists around me that were my peers that I have their phone numbers. I hang out with them. I do shows together. And I was so insecure that I did maybe what I did, I think maybe two, three, four duets or collaborations. And I look back and I go, you idiot. You could have done 50, These are such amazing people. I could have written songs for other people. I could have created joint ventures with other people. But I think when you're just barely made it, you have all this imposter syndrome and you're trying to just care for yourself and not overflow onto others. But obviously, it's one of those things, shoulda, woulda, right? Like I was 23, okay? I'm 55 now. I couldn't have had the wisdom of a 55-year-old when I was 23. So that was one. I think the big other one the one that actually really harmed me was the romantic side of it because I had this perfect storm of okay, every like 50% of the female population has a crush on me and have posters on their walls, right? Across 15 countries, which is in itself very strange and abnormal, right? That's just not normal especially for a young kid to be exposed to. And because it doesn't reflect real life. It's almost like this made up reality. Then on top of that, I had tremendous trauma from my parents' divorce.
Mm.
So I had, fear of intimacy. I would sabotage every relationship I was in. I was just not like I didn't know how to do romance at all. So imagine that multiplied by being a pop star. Not a good combination at all.
I can't even imagine being in those shoes. So, thank you for elaborating on that.
Yeah,
Because I told you a lot of my viewers and listeners are in some format in the showbiz industry. So
yeah,
it's nice to hear someone who has had incredible success
yeah,
and some of the personal things that you actually still felt, even though everyone else is looking at you going, he's
yeah,
it. He's
yeah.
it.
Hmm.
Would you take me a little more down the path of how did divorce really, really impact you?
It just rocked my world because our family was generally speaking, a very happy family.
Mm,
Like both my parents were very present. Both were incredibly um, kind to us, to my sister and I. A very affectionate family. Like we're all
mm,
hugs and kisses, and so we're not the family where like the mom is crazy or the dad is not present or emotionally unavailable. They were all very available, actually,
Mm,
And then with the backdrop of so much actual life-changing and even life-threatening drama going on and moving from place to place, your family becomes your world. That is your world. Like you don't have an extended world because it keeps
mm,
changing on you, right? So the family is your whole universe essentially. And yes, you have friends, et cetera, but that's where you take shelter. And then when that gets shattered, and my dad was unfaithful to my mom, and it was just destroyed her, and they couldn't reconcile, and basically she left. Um, what it left me with is this sense of profound pessimism, I guess, like chronic pessimism about romance, because
mm,
I guess what the story I was telling myself is that, look, yeah, you might fall in love, you'll get married, and maybe you'll have a kid or two, and then eventually, someday, the whole thing's going to go up in smokes, and your
mm,
kids are going to be traumatized, and there's nothing you can do about that because everything that I've seen around me ends up pretty much like that, or even worse, in a sense, for me, in my sort of young arrogance, or you'll stay together, but it will be like this very, very unhappy marriage.
mm,
That's it. So my whole worldview about romance was that. And of course, that clashes with your desire to love and be loved. So you do develop a romantic relationship with someone and you enjoy it for a little bit, and then it starts getting serious. And the minute it gets serious, all of those triggers come out. And I would just act out. Or do something horrible or say something horrible on purpose to drive the other person away. And
mm,
I look back at now and I think it's just, I didn't even have the character, I feel like, to be upfront with the girls I dated and say, look, I'm not really looking for this or that. I was such a coward because I wouldn't even say that. I would do something to drive them away. I'll make them leave, you know?
mm,
So I was an idiot basically. Um, and it really, really hurt people and hurt me as well, obviously. And until I couldn't really escape because you break up with a girl, you know, you get over it, she gets over it, and you move on. There's other fish in the sea, all of that, right? But if you have a baby with someone, which was what happened with us, with my oldest daughter, yeah, you can't really get away from that reality. And you do the exact same destructive stuff. And now you have a daughter who's not going to have a father in the family. And that really wrecked me.
How did you learn to get beyond that? Because obviously you have a very good marriage. You have three wonderful daughters.
Yeah.
How did you go from the insecurities and the chaos that you're putting yourself through to actually becoming the man that you are today in marriage and love?
I was coached by someone. And I mean, that's part of the reason why one of the things that I do is coaching. Um, because now I realize that the presence of one human being who has the wisdom that you don't have, who cares enough and is willing to walk with you and show you the way, and who could, from your perspective, he or she can see around corners, you know, things that you don't see, is a transformative reality because you can have all the talent in the world, right? I was playing sports arenas, I was selling millions of albums. I had the goods in the showbiz space, and I was a complete disaster in the romance and relationship space. And then the disaster on this side will affect eventually my creativity. And I
Mm,
think if you have an audience of artists, I think that's an important thing to remember
mm,
is that you can be over invested in your artistic career, but if you don't develop yourself holistically in other areas of life, that will eventually affect your art as well, which it did. And to me, basically, I met this guy. He was a Canadian missionary in Moscow, like this very wild dude, because it was rough in the 90s in Russia. Okay. Now it's pretty civilized and it's like Dubai and Moscow, right? But at the time it was pretty rough. It was
mm,
post-Soviet. And so there was this guy who was a missionary. He was a church planter and a Christian, and he had this family, and I sort of observed his family, and I was like, this is what I want. And I basically just point blank told him, I need you to tell me how to do this, you know? And he did. And that was it. It was just apprenticeship. It's apprenticeship
Mm.
under a master. That's what changed.
What made you decide to leave pop and music and be transition basically to more faith, more entrepreneurship, coaching, all the what drove you to that?
It was just a shift in the force, I guess. Yeah. I really do think that our purposes evolve with us, and there's seasons in life, you know, and they seasons start and seasons end, and you need to be able to pivot, responding to you, and be aligned and sensitive to the whispers of the soul, I call those, you know. Um, and what happens is this, is that, you know, we go into whatever. Let's say we go into film because I actually really wanted to make movies originally. And I just didn't have the character to study enough to go to film school. And I had an easy in to this other school that offered economics. I was like, whatever, you know. So, but I really wanted to be a filmmaker. To this day, I just love film. I study film. I actually ended up directing and producing a film just to prove it to myself that I can do it. But you go into a profession, and your I call that your fuel for going that drives you there. You always have a mixed fuel, right? And it
Mm,
could be because it's different motivation. You know, you do it for the pure passion for the art. You do it because numbers excite you and you want to study math, or do you want to, you know, make humanity a multiplanetary, you know, species and go to Mars? Whatever it is that drives you, that's the purest fuel. But there's other fuel. It's rejection, it's loneliness, it's insecurity, it's desire for love, is bitterness, is revenge. It's all these things that all are mixed in this field. And basically, the way I see it is that if you want to do better and better in life, you need to purify your fuel, and you
mm,
take it from low grade to high grade fuel. And if you don't do that, the impure fuel will mess with your life, you know, and will interfere with your journey, and the work that you do is going to make it less, right? So so to me, so this is a long-winded answer,
mm,
but what happened was I was on a train ride. I was going from city to city, and by that time I was doing like sports arenas. So I had a crew of probably 20, 21 people working for me at the time. So we are like a very rambunctious crowd playing cards in the train, hanging out, having fun. And I was at this moment, I think either people were asleep or they went to the restaurant in the train or something. I was alone in the car, in the train car. And I remember going, is this all there is for me? I
mm,
had that very distinct whisper of the soul, I call that, right? It comes from somewhere inside. It was not just a random thought, it was something true that you know it's very, very true. And what it showed to me is that on the surface, I had achieved things that most musicians never achieve, and I was living the dream. And yes, and there are incredible artists who will live and die doing this one thing, painting, writing, you know, creating music or film. That is it, that they live and breathe that thing. And I was so lucky, and it almost felt guilty that I had in my hands and in my life something that most of those people that live and breathe, they would die for. And it wasn't enough for me,
mm,
basically. And you know, because honestly, it felt like boredom to me,
mm,
which is sort of a strange thing to say if you're a pop star, right? Like, how can you be bored? And I was bored. I think because I grew up, you know, in four different countries. I spoke four languages. I have an economics degree. That none of those things were being used. All of these parts of me were dormant, you know. I'd become a Christian, so I wanted to help people spiritually. I entertained millions of people, but I didn't, you know, change any lives. So I had all these fuel come out that is different fuel, you know, that, and it was driving me away from music. And it was a scary thought because I either would just suppress that indefinitely because I had a good thing in my hands and there was so much uncertainty if I went another direction. There's no guarantee of success. I already knew that. And most likely it's going to be less profitable and definitely, there's no celebrity in it. Um, but I sort of had that sense of, I'm not going to regret. I'm not going to live in regrets.
Mm.
I'd rather pursue the purest fuel, the thing that really matters the most right now, than live somebody else's dream and play it safe, basically. So that was a very long-winded answer.
That's an incredible answer. And I've never heard anyone refer to all the pieces as the fuel for your
Really.
life.
Yeah.
So thank you for that imagery. And really, it does help someone begin to understand that all the components that play into the passion that they're living or that
Mhm.
they're not living. Christian, I have 1,000 questions. I'm attempting to narrow it down to the one that I'd like to really drive. Actually, you spoke about you've learned the lesson of the playbook of the components that actually help you create,
Mhm.
should we call it success? I'm always allergic
Yeah.
to that word.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Personally, I'm allergic to that word.
yeah, we can say that.
What was the playbook? What is it that we could offer people so that they go, here's some things that we need to work on, especially since you're a high performance coach?
Right. Yeah. I obviously I obsess over the answer to that question all the time because I'm not only building my story and living it, but I'm helping others live theirs at the highest level. And to me, so there's a few things, and just like you said, I can talk about this for days because I truly obsess over this. But I would say on the foundational level, fuel is one, right? The thing that I just mentioned, and it's to get to understand what you're fueled by. Uh, y- so it's not even just understanding. It's how do you turn bad fuel to good fuel? How do you turn low grade to high grade? So that to me, that's a massive playbook piece, right? And what I teach people to do is to how do you go from low grade, let's call it anxiety, it could be fear, it could be stress, it could be busyness, overwhelm, it looks differently. It could be burnout at the extreme levels. But it could also be anger, resentment, um, victimhood. Those are the low grade fuels that really slow us down. They don't really drive you far. You can't go far on these fuels. How do you turn that to generosity, creativity, joy on command, on demand? So to me, that is a core skill. That is a core skill. That if you'll know how to do that, and by the way, you can totally learn how to do that. Anybody can. That is one pillar thing for success, for a successful life. Because whatever changes you need to make in life, and everybody needs to make those changes, you must change before anything changes. So if you don't know how to change yourself, if you don't know how to self-regulate, you're sort of dead in the water. You're going to go in circles. You're going to plateau and just sort of stay there for a while. So that's the first one. The second one is understanding how to get momentum in life, which is direction plus speed, right? You need to go in a certain direction. I need to move there with a certain speed. And most of us um, get stuck at a certain point. Maybe we get momentum for a while and then we get stuck or we go in circles. And there's all kinds of factors that play. There's a mosaic of factors that play in that. But basically saying, look, this is where I want to go. This is why I'm going to go there. And this is how I'm going to get there. And then stick to that and get the necessary components to life to have gain momentum. That is probably the other thing that I consider at the top of the list of success because momentum is everything. Momentum gives you vision, it gives you excitement, it gives you motivation, it gives you joy, It gives you hope, right? All of those things that you need to keep going. If you think and imagine anything and you don't do anything and you don't have momentum, even your temporary inspiration is going to go away. Plus, you're not going to learn anything because momentum always reveals something new. You know, if I want to walk 100 miles, I will, I have to work 1 mile to understand what it entails to be 1 mile in. If I don't walk the mile, I'll just imagine it and I'll probably get more things wrong. You have to walk, you have to go, you know? So that's probably the second thing. I think the third for me would be this thing I call resistance. And it's basically, it's both an emotional, primal, and also, I believe, spiritual force that will push against you if you want to go up,
Mm.
you know? It will push you down. And understanding the nature of that force, of that resistance, and understanding how to deal with it and to disarm it and how to still move. That's crucial because the minute you get momentum, the previous thing I was talking about, then the second you get momentum, you will experience resistance unleashed upon you in so many different ways. It's crazy. And part of the reason why I think all of us are tremendously gifted and can be an incredible gift to the world in more ways than we can even imagine. The reason why most people don't do that and don't experience success at a holistic level, sustained success, is because resistance gets them. So even if you get momentum for a while, resistance kicks in and you succumb to it and you just stop moving, basically. So that'll be the three main things. And the fourth one would be more of it would probably be like a marathon level um, pillar. And it's understanding that success can only be holistic or it's not success,
Oh,
basically.
elaborate on that one.
Well, because most professionals, and especially if you have a lot of creatives in your crew, in your audience, um, we're so passionate about our art form, and we overinvest in that, and we underinvest in things like spiritual development, family, deep friendships, human relationships in general, and then down the line from there. But those are the top four things. They get the fourth one. The fourth one is meaningful work. So artists are very good about meaningful work. They get it. They get that part. They really want to do meaningful work. But if you do meaningful work and you don't have a a um, a spiritual practice, a transcendent practice that takes you away from you being the center of the universe, which will hurt you 100%. If you're the center of the universe, which most creatives lean that way, you're sort of a diva, right? I've behaved like a diva more times that I care to even remember because it's just embarrassing, right? Um, how do you diva yourself? You understand that you're not the center of the universe and you can live for something bigger than yourself. That's a spiritual practice. It gives you perspective, it gives you scale, really helps your actually art form if you really focus on that. Um, family is central. I am like a poster child, right? I can play sports arenas and I will be destroyed internally because of one thing, family. I can be extraordinary as an artist and I can be completely incompetent as a husband. And one thing will affect the other. And then the third thing is sort of the friendships, relationships in general. So beyond family, it's everything. Everything in life is about relationships. The people that you collaborate with, people you learn from, people you get guidance from, people that you lead, people that depend on you, your team. On the business side, relationships in business, at the highest level, it's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. So if you don't understand relationships at the deepest level, all of your talent a lot of it will be wasted, and there's sideways energy. So the list goes on and on, but those are the four big ones, basically.
Step back a little bit to the resistance part,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the biggest areas that I see when I'm speaking with people, just like you're coaching high performance. What are some of the resistance you've actually faced, and a
Hmm.
couple of the ones that you hear from the people that you're coaching and you're training?
Well, it could be, I mean, I use that word in a broader sense than just internal, but it starts with the internal. It starts with, look, you and I are tribal beings. The biggest fear we have, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, is the biggest fear is actually not fear of failure. The biggest fear that we all face as human beings is fear of rejection. If I write my book, if I start my company, if I build my software and it fails, it's not the failure that terrifies us. It's that our family will laugh at us, mock us, our friends will no longer love us, etc., etc., etc. Which is completely untrue, by the way, completely untrue, 99% of the time. But that's the most primal fear that we all share. So that's the internal piece, right? Then from there stems all kinds of behavior, right? You start the book and you never finish the book. You start the software and you don't launch the software because you want to work out all the bugs, but you won't be able to work out all the bugs until you launch it and you get feedback. But you're still working on the bugs because if you launch it, then you're done. Now the judge will put down the hammer and declare you a loser, right? So you don't finish and you run out of money, your investors' money, and now you're looking for more money, and now you're making excuses for why you didn't launch the app in the first place. You don't write the stupid song, you don't, because it's going to be the first 100 songs you write are bad songs, and you know it. But you don't want to get to the 100 at first. That's going to be brilliant and it's going to be a big hit. So that's the internal piece, right? That's the internal piece, and then there's like these concentric circles out from inside to out, which are, the first time you make a presentation to investors, you're gonna, they're gonna not, no one's gonna give you money for 50 presentations straight, most likely, if you're a startup founder. Why? Because you're talking about yourself too much. You don't understand how investors think. You don't understand the market. You don't understand functionality. You don't understand what to talk about and what to emphasize and what to de-emphasize. You know nothing, but you have to show up and make the presentation again and again, right? The first time I did a dance gig, I was just a break dancer. Break dancers are like jazz musicians, they improvise, but they can't do a show. It's a different genre. So I was auditioning for someone who is a well-known singer. I was like, "Hey, can I be a backup dancer?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Show me what you got." So I had this friend, and I choreographed a little number for the person. So he sat there in the audience, and we did it, and I was like so proud of myself. And he's like, this was not like full force, right? Like this, are you just half doing it? What is this? And I realized that I suck. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. Uh, and that was sort of my first, you encounter with reality is what we're terrified with, right? And that's reality. Reality is that I sucked. 2 years later, I was blowing up the stage in front of millions of people, and no one could move like I did. No one in that whole industry. Not one person. But there's 100 steps from from that encounter to what happened later. Most people won't just take the steps, so there's that resistance. And then there like actual, I really believe there's spiritual forces that will block your way, if you're trying to do something good. So like everybody I work with who becomes a client of mine, one of my first conversations with the person is, hey, I want you to know that really there's going to be resistance. There's going to be a lot of it because you're trying to improve your life and make dramatic changes and create a new future for yourself. And I want to warn you to not freak out. Like I literally have this conversation with people every single time. And there's still a time there's still a person that I have to encounter that work with me that haven't experienced that. And they call me like a week or 2 weeks later, and like, Christian, you don't believe it. This is crazy. You told me exactly this is going to happen and this is happening. And thank you for warning me and, all of that stuff, right? And at the same time, I really believe there are spiritual forces that will also be your allies. So you'll encounter really strange coincidences for the bad that you need to understand how to not freak out and not lose momentum and actually keep going. And you will encounter incredible coincidences for the good. Like completely, there's no way this is just a coincidence type stuff where you go, huh, there's a little glimpse here of the future, right? So that's, I'm unpacking resistance for you.
Thank you, because I could spend hours talking to you about this specific piece, but
Yeah,
there's so many wonderful things to cover. For me, when I look at you, Christian, I go, this is a very kind human being. You have a charity that you are involved in.
yeah,
A lot of the clients you take on have more of a social impact, not just
yeah.
growth. So, how do you combine, and this is always one of my own setbacks, how do you combine high performance with also doing things that are humanitarian? Because you're doing both. I mean,
I am,
you're
yes.
touching so many areas. And I go, in my mind, high performance is usually people that are so driven that aren't paying attention to anything else except
Hmm.
their life and themselves. So help me unpack for me and for the audience, how do these two mash up together?
Right. I get it. I get the question. Um, I believe that if you want to be a high performing person, and by high performance, I don't mean you generate millions of dollars and that's the only thing that you high performance is like the highest way of living,
Mm.
you know? If you really want to be fulfilled, impactful, thriving, creative, expanding, that's why I call it the exponential life, right? That's why the coaching is called exponential life. You can't really do that without generosity. Like it's impossible. It's completely impossible. So if you don't incorporate giving and generosity, you are quite literally are unable to live an expansive life, an extraordinary life. You won't be able to do it. You will fail 100%. So I tell people, hey, when decide where you're going to give your money before you make the money. And as a matter of fact, start giving the money. And I would say these three things. It's not just money. It's treasure, time, and talent. The three T's. Give those three away now because it's not going to get easier to give them away as you progress. There's always going to be reasons not to do it. But if you start doing it now, it will be such a vital part of who you are that you're not going to stop. And because of the increased capabilities, money, success, etc., you'll give more money, more treasure, more time over time. So do it now, design it, hardwired it into your system. So that's sort of my conviction. And to answer and to answer quite frankly and transparently, the question is how do you combine it well? I am really bad at that actually. I over invest in causes and under invest in profit. And I'm not saying that, and can people go, "Oh, that's so noble." I'm not saying that in a good way. I'm saying that in a bad way. That's my weakest the weakest part of my character now is that is there's an imbalance where I under invest in profit and business and I over invest in causes. And that comes also from, origin story stuff, right? So childhood, all of that. So I'm working on that. That's the thing that I have as a work in progress, uh, a dimension of my life.
Thank you for being so authentic about that because it is a struggle for a lot of people where how do I give and how do I still create so that
Yeah.
I can give? Because it really is that find
Hmm.
balance, if there is
Yeah.
such a word as a balance. For you, Christian, what what made you choose high performance coaching versus all other forms of coaching? Because there's a ton of coaching out there.
Yeah, there's life coaching, business coaching. Yeah, there's all kinds of coaching, obviously. For me, it was because they say your mess is your message. And that's the reason. The reason is that I was that person. I am that person, not just was. But I am that person who has this inexplicable drive and energy and creativity and just off the charts that. And because of that, I can, start a nonprofit and it works. Start a production company in LA and it works. Start a music career. I mean, write a book. I'm releasing a book in December and it comes out pretty good. Um, and I don't say that to brag. I say that it's all people that know what I'm talking about exactly, high performance people, that it's also a curse, right? There's a dark side to it because God is fair, which basically means he gives you a lot of capabilities on one side and takes away capabilities in others. So every single driven person I know has flat sides that are horrible, you know, that they're completely inadequate in this area and this area and this area. It's just true, right? So the reason why I'm doing high performance coaching is because I just love high performers. I love their passion to achieve. I love their desire to have impact, to change the world. Those are world changers. And the worst thing, the tragic thing that I observe all the time is somebody who is like that, who literally was put on this earth to change the world. And they shoot themselves in the foot and they don't change the world because of the flat sides, the blind spots they have. And what I do for them is transform them into high performance in one area to high performance as human beings, holistic. And that's my passion because somebody helped me with that. And even you say to me, "Hey, you do this and this and this, and it's so cool." The only reason why I can do this, and I've been doing it for over 2 decades, is because somebody helped me. And I learned from that you need people in your life. And if you find the right people, hold on to them and whatever it takes, you know, be around them because they will make you high performing, from high performing in one narrow area to high performing in general, and not high performing for, you know, burning the candle at both ends in 3 to 5 years. And then you just are what? Divorced, bankrupt, depressed, and drinking, to high performance for life, right? That's my passion because I am that person.
Christian, would you be able to help a few individuals that I know of that are high emotions, we'll call them? They're high
Okay.
in emotions. And when things alter, they don't know how to step forward. They fall apart. How do you, through your coaching, help someone that has gotten to, let's call it a plateau, and
Hmm.
they just don't know what to do with the next step? But they're incredible human beings. They're just not seeing it.
Well, give me a little bit more context. I know that this is a sort of broader concept, like almost like a mosaic, a composite, right, of several people. But are we speaking of someone who is has already gained mastery in their life and they just reached
In
a certain
certain ways.
success, reach a certain success, and then they sort of get stuck and don't know how to progress? Or they haven't gained mastery in the first place. They're just sort of spinning their wheels in general.
They've gained mastery in a few areas
Okay.
and now are working on a different area.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, they're feeling like everything is falling apart. They can't step forward, even though they are very capable.
Yeah.
of accomplishing a lot of things. They have accomplished a lot of things
Yeah.
to the point that they feel desperate. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the part that really gets me. It's like you see someone who is so incredible, yet you see them in other facets that they're just
Yeah.
they're ready to give up.
Yeah. All the time. All the time. And that's actually the curse of an extra driven, is that the drive doesn't turn off. They just can't turn it off. It's there. The fuel is there. There's a lot of fuel. It's just a lot of it is bad fuel, you know. So, so that I would point to that. I would point to the fuel piece, right? And I would say, look, the number one thing I would do if someone comes to me like that and say, "Hey, and can you help me?" is say, "Look, the first thing I will teach you is a daily practice, and you have to do what I tell you to do. That allows you to get absolutely in touch with your deepest emotions every single day, process those emotions, put them in a structured way that it's rational, not just swirling around in your brain, right? Filling your body with stress hormones, and then resulting in escapist behavior, paralysis, all of that, sideways energy. But you would I will teach you the practices on how to become self-aware. I call that metacognition, being able to think about your thinking, think about your feeling, and putting it in a certain order. Then also engaging your body and your inner pharmacy to fix that, because people that are paralyzed, their bodies are usually reflecting that, you know. Um, and they do things with their bodies that are unhealthy, and their bodies are not their allies, right? But I would say get healthy, eat well, move every day, sunshine, nutrition, all of that, because your body has all of these solutions, all of these resources at its disposal that it wants to deploy to help you get out of the plateau. You're just not allowing it to do so. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, instead of obsessing over, what's missing, what I can't do, the resources I don't have, it's I call the illusion of limited resources.
Mhm.
Uh, um, Learn the skills that you need. Even if it's a small step, you have to take action every day. And then you bridge that gap. And it might feel a little slow in the beginning, but once you develop the ability to learn quickly, I call that immersive learning. And I literally know, I mean, there's a technique associated with it. It's not that hard. Anybody can turn it. So you sort of combine immersive learning, physical engagement, metacognition every single day, and you'll get out of the plateau 100%.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Uh, as we transition from what people are feeling as chaos to something better,
Okay.
what would you say are some of the routines that you even employ for yourself that help you stay grounded? Because, like I said, you touch so many incredible areas that from the outside you go, how does
Yeah,
he
it gets
do all
overwhelming.
this?
Yeah.
How does when a lot of coaches tell you stick with one area, you go, wait a minute. There are incredible human beings that are able to touch multiple areas.
Yeah.
So, what are the routines that you even employ?
Oh, I could talk about it all day as well. I think on a high, let's say you want to you do you mean emotional routines, spiritual routines, physical routines, relational routines, daily things like that? So very, very tactical
Things that
stuff.
keep you grounded
Yeah. Okay.
because you are continually transitioning from so many
Yeah, I
different
am. Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I would say yes. So basically what I told you, right? So I'll give you a quick snapshot of my day, for example, right? Um, I get up probably 5:30 before the sun. Everything's very quiet. My wife has insomnia, so she gets up a little bit later, because she sort of doesn't sleep during the night on and off, right? So I get up at 5:30, it's quiet, and there's prayer and journaling. in music. I like Bach, some cello concerto, something like that. And basically, that's the metacognition piece. It's what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? What does that mean? What am I grateful for? Invoking gratitude is an interesting thing because you feel less gratitude than you actually think you do have. So when you write gratitude, it's different from when you think gratitude. It's very strange. So there's all kinds of journaling techniques and things like that, prayer techniques as well, meditation, prayer, being in nature. Like there's a whole slew of practices, but let's call all of those things a contemplative practice, right? So the contemplative process happens every day. Um, for me, it's the whole routine is probably 2 hours. So it's that. I usually do creative, the purest creative work is also around that because I'm full of energy, right? Full of peace and just clarity, and there's no interruptions. So I usually, if I'm writing a book, that's when I write the book, an hour and a half, that kind of thing. I can write an article, I can write a script. The pure creative work happens there. I work out 3 times. I do resistance training 3 times a week. I walk every single day, minimum 1 time a day, sometimes 2 times a day for like a mile and a half, 2 miles, that kind of thing. That gets the blood flowing, that gets antidepressants into my bloodstream, cognitive increase. You actually become smarter when you work out. It's really interesting and more creative. When you walk, you become more creative. Some of the best ideas are doing walks. I have a specific route that I take. I have a trail here with deer and I have foxes and brooks and things like that. So it's really pretty. Um, so that's another piece. And then I also learn something new. So it could be I go on these binges. It could be it could be sales or marketing or AI or whatever. Like I'm endlessly curious, but I go on a binge where basically I go, I really wanted to learn this and get a grasp around this concept or this practice. Um, and I go on a binge, and I usually go one author, a second author, a third author, one podcast, second podcast, the third YouTuber, and I pull them these threads because all these people, when I tune into somebody, I'm like, this is my guy. I'm going to learn from, I'm going to be the apprentice, the virtual apprentice to this person. And I usually sort of obsess over this person, whatever the master, I call them the master in their art form, until I can finish their sentences. So I can be on the 3 month binge of this one YouTuber, basically, and everything they've ever done, I'll listen to, you know, and and then it sinks in, right? If you think about it, you go, that's a lot. It's overwhelming. Not really, because people dabble. You just do that thing for 20 minutes a day. In a year, you'll actually have tremendous mastery in that topic in a year. You don't even have to spend a year most of the time, but if you stick with something for a year, that one thing, you will be probably in the top 5% of that in the world. I'm not even exaggerating. Like there's studies around this, but we don't create that consistency in our lives, right? So that's the third piece is the learning piece. It's audiobooks most of the time. It's YouTube. I read a little bit. I'm more of an audible person and I take notes, right? So I commit that to memory. I sort of puzzle with it. Usually something new comes out of it for the stuff that I write or the coaching or media, things like that. So that's my routine when it comes to the morning. So imagine this. So remember how I talk about fuel,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you spend 3 hours in that mode every single morning, I'm on rocket fuel by like 9 a.m., right? By 9 a.m., I am flying. I'm excited. I'm energized. I'm full of ideas. And I come home from the gym and actually pray on the way back or listen to a psalm or something like that, something transcendent. Um, and I put breakfast in and I make breakfast for my wife. And she's usually sleeping in a little bit. It could be 8:30, 9ish. And I come in and I kiss her and I say, breakfast is ready. And she gets up and she has breakfast served every single morning by me. Now, why is that important? Because your family is the most important peace giving, love giving part of your life. you know, that simple, you know. You know how much joy you can experience first thing in the morning when that happens that way, you know. It's so awesome. Um, so on the family piece at 6 p.m. ish, I'm done. Like there's no calls, there's no podcast, there's no writing, there's nothing. It's just me and Deb. And I
Mm,
take her on a date. We watch some on TV. We're going to walk every night with my dog. So that's another routine, right? It doesn't have a direct connection to high performance, but it is the source of high performance. That's sort of my point, right?
mhm,
The other piece, routine wise, is that I do creative creation the first half of the day and communication the second half of the day.
mm,
So second half of the day is emails, calls, doing this with you. It's the second half of the day. You can attest to that, right? I will not do a podcast in the morning with anybody. There's very few exceptions, right? Somebody's in Europe and I really want to be on that podcast. Yes, I'll make an exception, but actually no. It's all afternoon. Why? Because I can do this without being in a certain state. This is easy for me to talk to you, right? But in the morning is the hard stuff. How do you write a chapter in a book? It's really, really hard. It's torturous, actually, things like that. How do you create something out of nothing? That's creation, right? By definition. So creation in the morning because you have a full tank of pure fuel, rocket fuel, and then communication in the afternoon. I'm done by 6 p.m. Pure joy, bliss, family love after that, So that's my day.
Thank you. Thank you for elaborating so well on that. I think that's going to be helpful to so many of the creators that are out there that are struggling,
Yeah.
structuring their own day. So
Yeah.
that's very helpful. Christian, how do people get in touch with you? I have a couple more questions, but how do they get in touch with you?
Well, it depends on what you need. But
Mhm.
if you're interested in some of more of the stuff that I was talking about, you just go to christianrayflores.com. It's my newsletter. This is sort of where I put all of my best ideas, podcasts, guest podcasts, things like that. Um, and it's a free newsletter. Every new thing is free. If you want to support the team that produces it, you can pay a little bit, like a latte a month, that kind of thing. It's the Substack thing. So if you want to work with me, I'm usually not taking new clients, but I do have a way to put somebody on a plate on a wait list, and down the road, if there's a spot that opens, I can say, okay, I already know who this person is. I know um, I know the context, their problems, and I think I can help, and vice versa. So the way to do it is you go to exponential.life, exponential without an E, starts with an X, and you just set up basically like a strategy call with me. And the strategy call will also ask you to take an assessment because if I speak to you for half an hour, I want to know exactly where you're at. And then I can give you free advice. And if I look at this and then you look at me and you go, man, I really want to work with you, I'll tell you how to join the wait list. So that's the way.
That's awesome. Christian, what is your, how do I say it? What is your relationship like with your daughters?
It's actually really wonderful, and it's probably one of the things that I'm proudest of in
Mm,
life. And the reason I'm proudest of those things in my marriage is because that was the very thing that I didn't know how to do. I was very good at music. I was very good at entertaining, and I was not a good father and not a good husband. And I vowed that this this inability, this inadequacy will stop with me because I've experienced that my whole like three generations of my household. That's what
mm.
gets passed down. So I made it my mission that I would prioritize my skills and my abilities to become a husband and a father over anything else. And it's a hard choice to do, especially if you're a driven person, because you get called and invited or, get possibilities and opportunities. And basically what I've done my whole life that the girls have been alive is that I've always said no to anything that distracts from them. So I've never missed any one recital, one significant event, never, not once. And because I was, and then we homeschooled two out of three. So we were fully immersed in their lives and they with ours. And so we traveled, we took them everywhere to the glamorous places like Paris and to the slums of Mozambique, the poorest
Mm,
places on earth. And because of that, they've been exposed to the full range of the human condition. Um, they've read, they've had an incredible education. They love books. All three of them love books. All three of them are very different, very different, but extraordinarily talented, entrepreneurial, ambitious, driven, in their own way. And I have a warm relationship with all three, even though they are making their own way. And just like anybody else in their, early 20s to all the way to late 20s, my oldest is 29, they see drama, they make mistakes, they experience pain and all kinds of, no one is immune, right, from the from the from the drama of the human experience. And what I love about our relationship is that through all of it, Deb and I are there and they trust us.
mm.
And when things are bad, they come to us, you know. Actually, when things are good, they still come to us, which is actually a really good thing. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine, and that I was so encouraged. Deb was traveling. This is an illustration, right, of my relationship with them. Deb was traveling to see her family, and I'm home alone and stuff like that. And I get a text from my middle child, Violetta, and she goes, "Dad, can we go watch a movie together and have dinner?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then we couldn't find the movie. And she's like, "Oh, it's okay. I'll come to you." And she like shows up, and I prepare steak for her. I get some wine. I get her dinner. It's like a daddy date. I go on a daddy date with all three of them every once in a while. And but the cool thing, I was telling my friends in my coaching cohort, I'm like, do you guys think this is normal? I don't remember myself wanting to hang out with my parents when I was 22, you know? And they were like, no, that's not normal, man. You know? And to me, that is just the greatest joy that she would want that. Just like that. No other reason. She just wants to hang out with me, age 22, you know? So that describes it all.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I actually have a brother-in-law that has an incredible relationship with his daughters and even my nieces. And you can see the difference in the way that these young women show up in life, knowing
Yeah.
that there's someone there that they can trust. So I'm thanking you on behalf of your daughters
Yes.
for,
Thank you.
for who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Christian, my
Yeah.
last question. If I put you in front of actually, I have to. If I put you in front of a gigantic group of young individuals from a variety of life, what would you like to say to them? They're starting out, they're in their 20s, just like your daughters are.
I would say trust your calling, like really trust, the whispers of the soul.
Mm,
What lights you up, right? And it sounds pragmatic on the surface. Not pragmatic, actually. Idealistic, I guess, right? Um, but that's precisely why I say that. And I'll tell you why it's actually the most pragmatic thing you can do, which is the second thing. Aim high because most people aim towards the middle.
mm.
And because most people aim towards the middle because it's safer. It's easier to fail and then explain it away, right? Well, guess the problem with that is that if everybody's in the middle, it's crowded. So the most risky thing you can do is aim for the middle. The middle is where mediocrity thrives and creativity dies.
Mm.
But if you aim high, if you trust yourself, I think you have a highest opportunity, A, to win, B, to really truly be creative and grow from even the hardships that you experience, and C, to serve humanity. Don't be a statistic. Don't be a statistic.
Thank you for that. And last but not least, is there anything that you'd like to say that I didn't ask?
Not really. I mean, you were very thorough with your questions. Thank you. That was really enjoyable.
Christian, I really appreciate you. I know you gave a lot of your wonderful time, your precious time. I really do appreciate you and I love you. I have binged on a lot of your stuff. That's why it's
Really?
comfortable talking to you. It's like,
I can
oh, I
tell
know
because you
Christian.
know you know exactly the questions to ask, which you've done your research. It means a lot, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do appreciate you. And to our wonderful viewers and listeners, please remember our attitude always determines our altitude in life. Thank you. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Rima.